The fjord was quiet that morning. Mist floated above the water like a soft white blanket. In the distance, the mountains stood tall, silent, and ancient. A small wooden boat drifted near the shore, and inside it sat a woman, Freya, the daughter of a fisherman. She came there every sunrise, long before the village awoke. She would listen to the slow ripples of the tide, to the call of distant gulls, to the sound of her own breath. It was her moment of peace before another day began. Her father once told her, "The sea listens, Freya. Speak to it kindly." So she did. She whispered her hopes into the morning fog, words carried away by the breeze. She didn't ask for riches or fame. She only asked for strength and calm. When the sun broke through the mist, she smiled, because for a moment it felt like the world itself had answered. In a small corner of a northern village lived Bjorn, the blacksmith. Every day, the sound of his hammer echoed through the hills, steady, rhythmic, calm. He forged axes, shields, and blades, not for war, but for survival. Each strike was a song, the song of work, patience, and life. One evening, a traveler came to him and asked, "Do you never tire of the same hammer, the same fire?" Bjorn smiled and replied, "Fire changes every day. Some days it roars, some days it barely glows, but it always teaches me something new." As the night fell, Bjorn sat outside his forge, watching sparks fade into the dark sky. He had built hundreds of weapons, yet never swung one in anger, because he believed true strength was not in battle, but in the hands that build. The snow had fallen for 7 days straight. The fjords were frozen, the skies were white, and silence ruled the land. In a small cabin, an old Viking named Leif sat by the fire. His hands trembled slightly, his beard was gray, but his eyes still carried the spark of his youth. Outside, the world was cold, but inside there was warmth. His grandchildren sat beside him, listening as he spoke of days long past. He told them about the sea, the longships, the storms, and how once courage meant sailing into the unknown. Now, he said softly, courage means staying, protecting what you love, even when the world grows cold. When the wind howled outside, the children drew closer to the fire, and Leif smiled, knowing the world would go on, not with warriors and battles, but with warmth, peace, and stories. The sun was pale that morning, hiding behind clouds of mist. Freya stood by the fjord, staring into the endless gray water. The sea was calm, but she could feel its power, ancient, waiting. Her father's fishing boat hadn't returned in 2 days. Most would panic, but Freya did not. She had grown up listening to the sea. She trusted it. She closed her eyes, whispered softly, "Bring him home, old friend." Hours passed. Then, as the light began to fade, a small figure appeared through the fog. Her father's boat, safe, rocking gently on the waves. He waved weakly, smiling. That night, as they shared warm soup by the fire, Freya said, "The sea listens, if you speak with kindness." Her father nodded, eyes glistening with pride. And from that day on, the villagers called her Freya of the Silver Sea, the girl who spoke to the waters. Winter came early that year. Snow covered the blacksmith's forge like a blanket of silence. Bjorn, now old and gray, lit his fire one last time. He was not making a weapon, but a gift. A small iron pendant in the shape of a wave for Freya, who once brought him fish when food was scarce. Each strike of his hammer echoed softly, steady like a heartbeat. When he finished, he placed the pendant on the table and whispered, "For those who build, not destroy." That night, the fire burned low. The next morning, the village was quiet. The forge stood cold. But the pendant remained, glowing faintly in the sunlight. They buried him near the sea he loved, with his hammer beside him. And sometimes, when the wind passed through the valley, it sounded like the soft rhythm of metal and flame, the blacksmith's song. Years after Bjorn's passing, the winters grew longer. Leif's grandson, Einar, had become restless. He wanted to leave the fjord, to chase gold, glory, and the world beyond. Leif, now old and wise, called him to the fire one evening. The flames flickered softly as he spoke. "I once chased the sea too, Einar, but I learned peace isn't found across the ocean. It's found inside you." Einar frowned. "But how will I know who I am if I never leave?" Leif smiled. "Leave if you must, but promise me this. Wherever you go, carry the calm of this place within you." Einar nodded, though he didn't fully understand. He left the next morning. Years later, when he finally returned, his hair gray and eyes deep, he whispered to the wind, "I carried it, grandfather. The calm. It never left me." The wind was gentle that morning. Einar stood at the edge of the same fjord he once left behind. Years had carved lines on his face, but his eyes still held the calm of home. He saw a woman sitting near the shore, quiet, serene. It was Freya, her hands resting on the sand, tracing patterns in the tide. They spoke little. The sea did the talking for them. "You've traveled far," Freya said softly. "Yes," Einar replied, "and yet I have returned to where peace truly lives." That evening, they shared stories by the fire, of storms, sunsets, and silence. Freya told him how she once spoke to the sea, and it brought her father home. Einar smiled and said, "Then maybe the sea remembers those who listen." And as the stars appeared above the cold northern sky, the waves carried their laughter. Two souls, calm as water, meeting where the world began. Days turned into weeks as Freya and Einar sailed together across the fjords. Their boat was small, just a wooden hoe, a sail, and their shared silence. They sought a place spoken of only in whispers, the Silent Isles, where it was said the wind itself refused to speak. For 7 nights they drifted under the stars. No storms, no fear, only endless calm. On the 8th day they found it, a cluster of rocky isles covered in moss and wildflowers. No birds, no waves, only stillness. Freya stepped ashore and said, "This is what peace sounds like. Nothing at all." They stayed there till dusk, breathing the quiet, listening to the heartbeat of the world, soft, steady, eternal. When they finally left, Einar said, "I will never forget the sound of silence." Winter came early that year. Snow fell like feathers, soft and endless. Freya and Einar found shelter in an old mountain hut, its walls carved by hands long forgotten. For days they spoke little, only tending to the small fire that kept them alive. Outside, the world froze in silence. Inside, warmth flickered like a heartbeat. One night Einar whispered, "Do you ever fear the cold?" Freya smiled faintly. "No. The cold reminds me that warmth exists." They sat together, wrapped in furs, watching the flames dance against the frozen walls. And for the first time, Einar realized Peace wasn't found in calm seas or quiet forests. It was here, in the warmth between two souls who had learned how to listen to silence together.